Welcome to the Dr. Bros, where we have an honest discussion around vet life in and out of the clinic. My name is Brandon, and I'm your doc of the day and your guide through this episode. I'm here with my closest friends from vet school.
Hey, this is Chris, and I'm a veterinarian in North Carolina.
Hey, this is Jeff. I'm a veterinarian in Kentucky, third-year veterinary resident.
And this is Adam. I'm a relief veterinarian in Louisville, Kentucky.
And again, it's Brandon, and I am a veterinary resident in Iowa. So we're just going to play just kind of a casual game of Would You Rather Veterinary Edition. I'll just keep it simple with two questions. Anyone could kind of chime in. There's no specific person this is directed to. So, would you rather see emergencies all day long?
No.
Or
Next.
Next. Or deal with a angry client for every appointment all day long?
Ah, shit.
This is Chris, emergencies all day long.
This is Jeff. I'm going to take the angry clients because being a dermatology boy, am not going to do well in those emergencies. I'm going to hate all of that. So give me, I have great client communication. Like, it's going to be what it is. They're going to be, even if they're mad, like I'll make most of them smile or not. And you know what? It's fine. It's literally going to be fine. I'm going to document everything and it's going to be fine. It's going to be great. I'll drink after.
This is Adam, and God, I said no to emergencies, but I think I got to take the emergencies because I'm very non-confrontational. I don't like getting yelled at. So,
Yes.
Oh God, it's a tough one, but I think I'd have to take the emergencies.
It's Brandon again. I'm not going to lie. Even though I see some really not so great cases with my current specialty, I would rather deal with angry clients. Emergency medicine is just not my deal. And I'm more than happy to just take it, go home at the end of the day, and not have to worry about all kinds of crazy stuff happening throughout the day in the clinic as far as the patient's concerned. But that's just me.
All right. Well, both the guys that worked in emergency said they would rather deal with angry clients, so maybe I'd need to change my answer.
Yeah. I mean, and that kind of leads into the topic today, which is basically just a general discussion about internship in veterinary medicine. And for anyone that doesn't really know, the basics with vet med is when you finish vet school, you have the option, if you would like, to pursue an internship, which generally requires you to be accepted through a match program where you apply to different internship programs. Usually you'll interview prior to finishing vet school. And then if you match with that program, you complete a 1-year internship with them. And then there is the option to essentially skip that process and just go straight into practice. And the whole point of the conversation today is kind of to discuss the pros and cons of that, because we happen to have a 50-50 split of veterinarians that completed an internship and then did not complete an internship. And we are all essentially, I think, pretty happy with where we are. So it's not like one path is better than another, but I think there are some pros and cons to both. And I think it's good to have a discussion about it. So just as a general overview of an internship and what that entails, for Jeff and I, we both completed a 1-year internship at a private practice hospital in different locations where we worked a variety of different roles. Lots of the clinics that have internship programs are specialty hospitals that have a variety of board certified specialists where you can get a little bit wider reach of experience. And, just starting off there, like, Jeff, how do you feel like your internship experience went as far as specifically gaining experience in veterinary medicine?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say experience-wise, it was very good. We were working So it was me and I had two intern mates that were working 80 plus hours a week. I'd say at the worst 100 hours. And that was very difficult. But as far as experience, I think like I exited my internship feeling like there was nothing that I could not see and try to stabilize. I didn't know how to work them all up for every specialty, of course. That takes a lot more training. But as far as being ready to take on any case, I mean, yeah, I got experience in oncology, ophthalmology, surgery, internal medicine, critical care, dermatology, sports rehab, and I'm in just like a touch of, we had a part-time cardiologist as well. So like I felt like I had dipped my toes into a little bit of everything and had a really good idea of how to work up or at least get started with almost any kind of case. So specifically experience-wise, I thought it was very good.
Cool. And like I had a very similar experience myself. We had a very strong neurology team. We had great surgeons. We had a strong ER department. We had a dermatologist that would come in and out, but I never rotated through that service. We had an oncologist. We had a radiologist on staff. And it just exposed myself to a lot of cases that I probably wouldn't have ever seen otherwise. Mm-hmm. And, that being said, on the flip side of things, you mentioned the hours. The hours for myself were just as terrible.
Terrible.
I was fortunate enough to be in an internship program where the company itself required 2 days off per week, which is not the status quo for different internship programs. But I think that made my experience much easier relative to other programs. There are academic programs, for those who are unaware, where you work at a hospital at a university where veterinary students are also currently being trained. And just at least with my experience working at a academic institution right now, it seems to be that the hours are not as well protected, at least at where I'm working currently. But there's just this huge advantage of having immediate freedom and kind of just going into like a more standardized work-life balance that we don't get outside of internship. And before I let you guys kind of dive into your experiences after graduating and going into private practice, I think one thing that people sometimes overlook is there are really good private practices that provide great mentorship in such a way that you would get from an internship experience without all the kind of like indentured servitude that we can essentially have at some places. So I'm really interested to hear, but kind of like specifically how your first year out of vet school was and how you felt your mentorship and guidance was following that process. And either of you guys can just jump in.
So this is Adam. For me, I can kind of relate to what you're saying about the benefits of going straight into practice. I mean, the biggest benefit is that work-life balance. I think at the time I was working probably close to 40 hours, so...
That's so nice.
So at least half, of what you guys were likely doing. So, I mean, obviously that's a big benefit. I mean, another big benefit that you didn't mention was probably pay. I'm sure I was making more right out, going into practice as opposed to internship. But on the flip side, it really does depend on the type of mentorship you get, because I was fortunate enough to where I was at a place, I was at Banfield right out of school, and they have a pretty decent onboarding process over the course of several weeks, just to try and kind of ease you into things. They put you with a specific doctor, specific mentor, and I was fortunate enough to where the mentor I was with was a phenomenal doctor, and he worked very, very closely with me. from the start, and kind of worked me through, the day-to-day of starting with just kind of healthy appointments and getting comfortable seeing those appointments and talking to clients about, preventative and stuff like that. And then eventually kind of building to, the sick cases and the little bit busier workload, and, starting with a low pet count and then gradually working up to a higher pet count. So things like that were really beneficial for me. Again, and kind of easing into it because, you can sit in the classroom all day. You can run through clinics at vet school all day, but you get out in the real world and you're calling the shots. It's a completely different ballgame, and I feel like you learn a ton in that first year if you're fortunate enough to be working with a good mentor. And so I think that's really crucial to where, that confidence builds for years to come, and how quickly you get comfortable with that going forward. But on the flip side, I've heard horror stories from new grads who say they'll hire on at a clinic and then that vet's like, all right, I'm going on vacation. You got it. And they just, leave the new grad to run the place for 2 weeks. And I just, I can't imagine that side of it right out of school like that. So, that's risky business when you're dealing with something like that. So that's something you definitely got to look out for when you're looking at getting into practice straight out of school. I think that's the biggest thing you need to keep an eye out for is to make sure that you're going to have that good mentorship going forward.
Hey, this is Chris, and yeah, I agree with Adam on the mentorship side of things. I mean, I went to I made it a 5 doctor practice where I went to. So I had a bunch of different doctors that I could ask questions to. I had like 2 that I really kind of honed in with, and they just taught me a lot, and it made life so much easier coming out into GP with no real experience besides vet school. But yeah, I was in the same boat, about a little over 40 hours a week. So it was bad if we went to like 45. So that's pretty much the gist of it there with that. But with working in GP, I mean, I liked it from the get-go. It was walk-in only, which is kind of like I would hate to do that again now. But at the time it worked out for me because if I couldn't see it fast, like there was just so many doctors there that other ones could like see the appointments too. And it was a first come, first serve. It wasn't really like, it didn't matter how many I saw at the beginning. So it actually kind of worked in my favor from the beginning. But then as I got faster with everything, I could start taking on more clients or see things quicker. Other thing too to think about as well from GP versus, I know, doing an internship is different. In GP, it depends on your type of practice that's set up. Like at that practice, the doctors did everything. So that's another thing that you got to think about too when you're interviewing and trying to figure stuff out is I literally had to do all my blood draws. I mean, I did everything except spin the blood work and read and do the fecals. I had to read the fecals, do all that stuff. So that's like a lot of work on you versus the practice I'm at now. I pull blood maybe 2 or 3 times a week, if that. I mean, in a place of catheter, like every blue moon, it's not super often we're doing it. So that's just the difference that you're going to as well as you got to think about that. But yeah, I mean, you do get paid more than I know most of our other counterparts were. So I personally liked the route I went. I could have saw myself going into a specialty route, but I just think it worked out better for me not to.
No, that's awesome. Thanks. Thank you guys for sharing your experiences. I didn't realize your first clinic was like a walk-in only. That just is, thinking about it is just mind-boggling.
I wouldn't recommend it now. It's terrible.
Hard pass.
Yeah.
No, it's a good way to learn though. I mean, that's kind of how internship was. It's just like high volume, heavy duty workload. And it's just, you just sink or swim. And like you guys said, mentorship is key. Fortunately, with my internship, and I believe Jeff would say the same thing, we had good mentors, even in the specialty side, even in the ER side. You have people that are keeping an eye out for you because like they know you're just out of school. You're not going to be perfect. And it's tough, like Adam alluded to, it's tough to go into a situation where someone expects you to just run the place immediately after school. I think, there's a handful of people that could come out of school and be ready for that. I think the majority, like at least myself, I can't speak for everyone else, but for myself, I was not ready to just be a general practitioner like that. As far as the pay stuff that you guys alluded to, I think that's one of the biggest downsides for people that are unaware. I think in human medicine, the pay is less, but I still think that the pay is much better than a veterinary resident. For veterinary residents, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but the average is what, like 35,000 probably a year
for residents, and
maybe
I think
for internship.
For internship, I think you're right, and I think that's a recent development. Like I think they've been going up because the average when I was a rotating intern, I think was close. Like I was making around 30,000, and that was like high. And I was like, "Woo! I can live paycheck to every other paycheck." Ow!
Oh my god!
Party!
Yeah. Similar to me. Mine was 35 in Denver.
Dang!
At the time. I know, and that was a recent bump. Like it was before that. It was less. Like the year before, it was less. And it's all. I think it's dependent on where you live too, because I think California the pay is a little higher, but maybe or academic institutions. I know, like I believe a lot of these places will post their salary on the internal or veterinary internship and residency matching program website. And like I think Colorado State, just up the road, cost of living is the same. It's like 28,000 or something for an intern, which is just bonkers for somebody coming straight out of a undergraduate degree, veterinary degree, student debt, trying to figure out where you're going to live, moving across the country half the time. It's a big deal.
I agree, especially when this is Jeff. Like when you're committing to these programs for a contract of 1 year, and you do literally have to very often pick up your life and move it, and the pay is pretty bonkers. And when you're doing a veterinary internship, unlike from what I understand about med school, where lots of programs you go straight into your internship and then into residency, and the first year of your residency is what's called the internship in a lot of programs. For us, it's very separated. So you pick up and move. I moved to San Antonio for a 1 year contract, and then there was no guarantee of anything after that.
Yeah. And that's kind of the reason why I picked doing GP in the beginning, because I can go where I wanted to and not have to wait to see if someone wanted to do something or pick me to go somewhere. Or, pay was a thing too, because I had a kid at the time. So it was one of those things. It's like, all right, well, I want to be able to afford things. That's definitely a factor to think about.
Yeah, and this is Brandon again. I honestly cannot imagine having kids and doing an internship. I can't imagine just having to manage things money-wise. I can't imagine having to manage things time-wise. To me, it just sounds impossible. But I know there's people out there that probably have done it, and kudos to them. As far as just going back to maybe some of the pros of internship, I will say, like Jeff alluded to, if I was in a situation, and I actually ended up being in situations as a GP following internship where you're seeing an appointment, things go sideways, you found something unexpected that was more emergent. I think the benefits that I had is I've kind of already seen some cases that are very similar, that I kind of not necessarily know like how to solve the problem and will solve the problem, but I know what steps need to be taken to expedite a patient's treatment and care. And that can sometimes be tricky. Like as a general practitioner, just like to be honest, in my 3 years as a general practitioner, we saw true emergencies rarely. And that was a combination of my circumstances at the hospital I was at, having an ER next door or close by. And it can be tricky when you're, let's say, a veterinarian in a 1 to 2 doctor practice in the middle of nowhere where you're just going to have to deal with whatever comes through the door. I don't know if you guys have any experiences like specifically Adam and Chris where you were like, oh crap, like maybe, if I had seen something like this, and whether it's internship or in vet school, had I seen this in person, maybe I would have done things differently.
This is Adam. For me, starting out my first year, we were in the heart of Louisville. There's 2 specialty clinics here. There's at least one more 24-hour facility in the city. So plenty of places to kind of refer people. And so anytime I got something that I felt was outside my wheelhouse, or if it was a true emergency, I would kind of recommend referral, and most of the time they would end up going. After I left Banfield, I went to a private practice, and the one that I was at initially was a little bit out a ways, maybe half an hour out from town, and pretty small community there. And I just remember, and I don't have any specific cases that come to mind, but just in general, I remember being in those situations where I'm like, okay, this is a little bit more advanced. This is a little bit more of an emergency. You need to go to referral. And they'd be like, no. And I'm like, okay. All right, well, let me see what I can do here. And so that really made me kind of forced me to become more comfortable with things. Whereas, again, with an internship, you're going through those rotations, you're seeing those things day to day, Whereas for me, that first year, I had that luxury of just kind of sending them to emergency. But once I got in that small community, again, people who didn't want to do the drive, people who didn't have the finances, people who just didn't want to spend that kind of money on their pet, and they're like, no, do what you can do here. It kind of forced me to kind of learn myself, which was good. Because again, I feel like I did learn a lot that way. But in a sense, it was a little bit of a culture shock, I guess, switching to that practice where more people would push back and expect, more from you just as the GP.
Hey, this is Chris. So my first practice was kind of like your second practice, Adam, where they're just kind of like, no, we're not going to go to referral. You just figure it out, or we can't afford it. I do remember one time, I was probably 4 or 5 months into practice, and I had a patient. We had to do surgery on it, and I forget what the surgery was on, but I think it was removing a mass of some sort or doing something. And I didn't anesthetically, it wasn't a great patient, but I remember I came back to work, one of the few times I went to check on the patient to make sure, because again, they wouldn't go to referral. So there was no one there late to stay with them. So I went and checked on it. They didn't like how it was doing. And I called JT because he was on an emergency rotation at the time.
Yeah.
And he I forget what it was. He talked me through it. Either way, I just remember calling JT and he's like, oh, you got this. And then we just figured out in 10 minutes on what to do. So that was some cases I do wish where I had an emergency thing to fall back on, but I also am kind of lucked out, and I could have called JT or Brandon and just been like, hey, what's going on? And we still do that now on how to figure out cases. So I think you learn a little bit slower GP wise, but you also learn quicker in some other things. So, there's just give and take on everything. And I really don't say there's one right or wrong way to do it. But now things come at you, now we're going, was it 6 years into it now? Right? Something like that. You don't get phased as much. You have it every once in a while, at least in GP stuff. I'm it is what it is, or it's fine, or we'll figure it out. Even true emergencies, they suck, but at least at least you've seen something where you can kind of go in the right direction and then try to stabilize it and then either boot it to specialty or kind of just tell the owner, hey, I can fix it, or I can try to fix it, but specialty might be better. But at least you don't get, I don't get as phased as much as I used to like early on in practice.
I would agree with that too. I feel like early on, those things really, kind of, I don't know, it took them kind of harder when they'd come in, just like a little bit more frazzled.
Yes.
And I feel like as I progress and the longer that I do this, you're not as phased. Not to say you're not phased,
Yes.
but you're not as phased, and you just feel a little bit more confident and a little bit more prepared of what you're comfortable with. And like you said, a little bit more comfortable of having that conversation with the owner of like, your best option is to go to referral. If that's not an option, I can try to do this, but and just kind of letting them know, being honest with them and letting them know that you're willing to try, but referral may be their best option.
No, that's good. I mean, I think one of the big things that I learned in internship was just like understanding the severity of a situation, kind of what to do in the immediate moment, and then when it just made sense to refer. Because like going back into GP practice following internship, or I guess going in for the first time, I should say, I don't have access to all kinds of stuff to treat an emergency right immediately. So just having that experience to say, okay, yeah, I've seen this before, or I've seen something like this. This is what needs to be done. We can't offer this here. There's a lot of power in that, and being able to do that. At the end of the day, I think it's like the right thing to do. Just knowing when you're at your limits, getting it somewhere where it can be done. And then, I guess the sad side of things is sometimes people want to be heroes and try and solve problems when it's a little bit too hard, or out of their wheelhouse. I think it's been good to get everyone's perspective on either side of things. I do think that another thing that we've touched on in a couple of different episodes is like mental health, internship plus mental health don't really always align well together. I definitely had some times where I was kind of pushed to my limits mentally. There were some really sad cases. You'll hear from veterinarians, whether they're in GP or in specialty or emergency, where certain times of the year, you'll see like, 10, 12 euthanasias a day or something crazy. Holidays in particular are kind of notorious for that, depending on where people live. So yeah, it's just something that we won't maybe need to go into big detail on, but being aware that the workload of an internship, the low pay, is not a great recipe for good mental health in a person following 4 years of vet school.
And I'll just add on to that.
So I guess
if that's okay, Brandon.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that's a really good thing to bring up because in vet school there probably are a lot of people who want to maybe go into a specialty and first or not even go into a specialty, but feel like they need that internship to kind of get that little bit more experience. But that may be something they take for granted, is the mental toll that comes with it, the extremely long hours, the extremely low pay, the extremely high stress associated with it. Not to say that they shouldn't do it, but having that understanding of what they're getting into beforehand, I'm sure would be very beneficial, especially, from a mental health standpoint. So I'm glad you bring that up.
Hey, and this is Jeff, and I want to piggyback on that a little bit because during my internship, so like my journey was vet school, rotating internship, general practice, derm internship, and now residency. One of the reasons that I went into general practice after my internship is because I was so burnt out and mentally exhausted and didn't know which direction that I wanted to take my life into. And it was like, well, I know I can do GP and I've got these really decent skills. Like one thing we haven't mentioned yet is that a lot of people will quote that 1 year of internship is equivalent to 3 to 5 years of practice, and of general practice, I guess. And I feel like in some respects that's very true, and that I kind of got out and I was like, throw whatever at me. I feel very comfortable seeing a lot of different types of cases, but my mental health was not amazing. And that's not to scare anybody from doing internship, but it's really just meant to say that go into a program, like, do your homework before you choose your program or even choose which ones that you're ranking for match, because you want to make sure that it's going to be good for you. And I had ways that I managed my stress and exercise and different things, but there are certainly things I could have done better before heading into that really rigorous program. And you also want to choose a program that is not hard just because veterinary medicine is hard, and working under mentors that are like, well, I had a hard time, so suck it up type people are awful. But you want to find a program that's difficult, because veterinary medicine by nature, what we do, putting that on steroids in an internship, an 80 plus hour a week versus 40 is a lot of work. You will get a ton of experience, but you should have a good idea of what you're stepping into, because it is a lot of work. And I don't regret necessarily doing an internship. I think I could have maybe picked a better one, maybe a better program, but I'm glad that I did do that internship, because now it was a really good stepping stone to where I am. So that's, again, not to scare anybody that these are difficult programs, but I also have friends who've done internships that were not nearly as hard as mine. And I kind of wish I had looked out a little bit more for what I wanted out of an internship and written those things down. What am I looking for? What type of internship am I looking for? Rather than, I mostly just looked at specialists, and I think I did great things. I looked at time off, and I got 2 hours of time, 2 hours, Jesus Christ, 2 days of time off per week. And other things that were super helpful that I thought were good stepping into my program. I looked at a lot of things, and wrote down all my pros and cons, and checked off all of my mental boxes for what I thought I needed to get to the next step. And then I ended up not doing that immediately. So I thought I was going to go into surgery, and I didn't. I forgot. So just don't be afraid of an internship, but do your homework for the programs that you're applying to.
Yeah. And this is Brandon again. I totally agree. And it's kind of hard, right? Like we're fourth year, like looking back as a fourth year vet student, like, oh yeah, like, this program is obviously better than one or the other. It's like you kind of have to just go based on interviews, trying to talk to the right people, trying to talk to staff there. But at the end of the day, you don't really know until you start working there. And then that's kind of where you are. So it's tricky. I think the way I was going to kind of have us end the conversation was just, like at the end of the day, would you either A, do an internship again, or B, would you want to go into an internship or feel that you would have better, been served by that experience? And that's tricky to answer. I think Jeff kind of alluded to how well, internship suited him at the end of the day. Just to touch on my experience, I would go back and do it again, as hard as it was. I actually, looking at my internship program compared to my residency program right now, I preferred the structure of my internship program much more so than my residency program. And that maybe that's a topic for another day. But I was in a program where time was relatively well protected. I had great mentors. I had great intern mates, which is something I didn't talk about, but the people that you work with, the other vet students that come out of vet school and are now doctors, can potentially make or break you depending on their ability to carry the same workload, work as hard as you do, have a good attitude every day, even in the midst of having a really busy work life or a lack of a work-life balance and a really busy work schedule. But I would definitely do it again. I think I'm a better doctor for it. And I think that, like Jeff said, every person's experience is different, and an internship is not like an end all be all. It doesn't define you as a better doctor compared to someone that didn't do one. But I definitely am appreciative of my experience.
Hey, this is Chris. I would not go back and do an internship. If I had to do it again, I'm happy with the route I took of going straight into GP. I got good mentorship coming out of school, and it worked out with everything, the path that I took. So Yeah, I'm happy with where I'm at, and if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't.
This is Adam. I'm kind of with Chris. I don't see myself going back and doing an internship. Honestly, even if I was single at the time, I don't know if I would have. Maybe, you never know. Maybe if I did want to specialize, there was one like brief like second in a day I thought about specializing, and then I was like, nah, better not. So
Good choice.
So, but no, I think in all honesty, like where I'm at right now, I feel like is the most comfortable and the happiest I've been in vet med to this point in my career. And, I attribute that to all the different steps I've taken along my journey to get to where I am. Would that have been different if I'd done an internship? Maybe. Maybe I would have got to the same place I'm at mentally sooner. Maybe I still wouldn't be there. It's tough to say. But, especially with how I am now with my current career, I'm happy with where I'm at. And I think that the path I went down kind of led me to where I need to be.
I'll make, I guess, brief comments here because I kind of, answer this question a little bit already, but I'll say one thought I had when Chris was talking. Actually, one of my intern mates was also a Chris, and he had 2 kids. So that's not saying that you should do that. I do think his experience was different than mine because I was stumbling back and forth to work without and taking care of a dog, but he was stumbling back and forth to wife and 2 children and a couple of dogs, and he had a lot more work to do when he got home than I did, for sure, in that aspect. So it's not for everybody, but if it works for you and if it works into your situation, I just wanted to point out that you can have a family and do this, but it's definitely not for everybody. It's not for the faint of heart, for sure. As far as like my overall experience, would I go back and do it? I would personally go back and try a different program. I don't know if I would do my exact program again. I'd want to try something different, but I am very appreciative of the experience and everything I got out of it, in spite of it being an extremely difficult, mentally draining thing that I did. And also, like, if you are thinking about internship and whether or not you do it, I do want to point out that you don't have to do an internship necessarily to do a residency. So if you're still thinking about specializing, but you're worrying like, oh, if I don't do this internship, I will never specialize. Being in derm world, I know at least for us, there's a ton of dermatologists who've never done a rotating internship and just did a few years of general practice. They do like 3 to 5 when you're applying to programs, and you would absolutely take a really unfortunate pay cut to come do this type of work. But I've seen people who really weren't happy in general practice who came, did a residency, and are now really accomplished dermatologists who've been in the field for literally decades that just weren't happy with where they were. So they made a change, which I encourage people to do regardless of where you're at in veterinary medicine. If you're not super happy with where you are, there's a lot you can do with this degree that's not just clinical practice in GP or specializing, just because that's what a lot of us here do. Just keep that in mind so you can really shape your own path. And that's one thing I really like about being a veterinarian. And in fact, like me going into specializing, one thing I really like is public speaking. And I just got back from our national derm conference, and there's vets in that who are specializing. Obviously it's a derm conference, but who spend almost no time in clinic and are just traveling and traveling and speaking all the time and like living their best lives. And there's some people working in industry and all over the place. So there's so much you can do. So don't limit yourself just to what you're in. Keep in mind that you can choose your own destiny. So you can specialize later if you want to. You just got to figure out what works for you.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's Brandon again. I guess I feel like the traditional path is vet school, internship, plus or minus specialty internship, residency. But like Jeff said, that's not always the case. I think by by the rules in place at most residency programs, it's either internship or equivocal 5 years of experience. So you can do one or the other or both, if depending on where you're at in your life. And yeah, I agree. Like, if you guys go back and listen to one of our previous episodes, you can hear about Adam's experience being in different areas of veterinary medicine throughout his career already. I agree. This degree can take you a lot of places. Thank you so much for listening to the Dr. Bros. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts. It would also help us out if you could share this episode with others who may be interested in today's topic. You can also tell us what you want to hear and drop suggestions in the comments or shoot us an email at thedrbros@gmail.com or DM us at thedrbros on Instagram. You can reach me on Instagram at drmasonim.
And this is Chris, and you can reach me on Instagram at dr.chrishernandez. That's dr.chrishernandez.
And you can reach me, this is Jeff, at dermdrjeff at Instagram and also on TikTok, and that's DERMDOGTORJEFF. And a quick note, like if you do have questions about internship or residency, slide into my DMs. Happy to answer.
And this is Adam. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Adam DVM. That's DRADAM DVM.